morning with you. Thank you all so much for being here. We are honored to have almost 100 people on our Racial Justice Roots convening call this morning. And as Maida and Paulina shared, this is our 2-day event, and we invite folks to stay for any parts that you can. And at this point, we are going to move into our panel discussion. We have an incredible lineup of panelists, and I am so grateful to all of them for joining us today to have a really important and insightful conversation about racial justice after a tough year. I am going to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves, Annie, Derric, and Stefan. Annie, we'll start with you if you don't mind just doing a quick introduction. Yes. And after the panelists introduce themselves, we are going to get into our conversation.
Thank you so much, Reena. I'm Annie Boneta, pronounced as she and her, and I'm a senior consultant with Recruiting Toolbox, and we provide customized talent and diversity training to companies globally. This summer, I think I was sharing earlier, I'm really looking forward to seeing my family. I haven't seen them in probably 2 years now, so really excited to head to Seattle to visit them soon. Derric, did you want to go next?
Sure, I'll jump in. Greetings and good morning, everyone. My name is Derric J. Johnson. I am the founding director of the Crossroads School Equity and Justice Institute. I've been in that position for about 3 years now. Prior to that work, I was a senior advisor to one of our local politicians, Supervisor Mark Lee Thomas with the Board of Supervisors, and heading his portfolio focused on criminal justice reform. And a lot of the reform efforts that Los Angeles has been pushing around the criminal justice system. Thank you, Reena, for the opportunity, and look forward to the conversation.
All right, hey, my name is Stefan Bradley. I am currently the Associate Dean of Faculty Development and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Bellarmine College of Liberal Arts at Loyola Marymount University. I got to LA some 4 years ago. Before that, I was in St. Louis, and I had the opportunity to work with Reena on the ground in a number of different capacities, especially though after the uprising in Ferguson occurred. And so I know how much of a gem Reena is and how lucky everyone is to have her here working with us. So very proud to be here. Also, Annie is my home girl of sorts. I'm from Washington State as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Stefan. And the connections are endless. In our call together just last week, I think we learned that one of Stefan's former students is someone that Derric worked with from St. Louis to LA. And so this is just a wonderful group of people that are all connected, may not have been connected before a couple months ago, but now are, and it is really our honor to host all of you today. So thank you so much. As I shared, it has been a tough year. This year, the last 6 years, the last 400 years, whatever timestamp you want to put on it, has been tough. I was sharing with folks this morning that I watched the new documentary called Ferguson Rises yesterday. It was all about Ferguson and what happened after Michael Brown's death. And it was tough. It was really tough to watch. Stefan and I were there. We were in those streets. We were doing those chants. We were immersed in the pain and the trauma and all that it brought. And it also, though, brought back some memories of last summer, just 12 months ago, right? What happened in all of our cities across the country in terms of racial justice and injustice. So I want to start with where you all are at. Just how are you? How are you feeling? It has been a challenging year. Where's your head? Where's your heart? Just curious if we could start there. Stefan, can we start with you, and then Annie, and then Derric?
Sounds good to me. I you know, if I'm being honest, I'm still overwhelmed. I think waiting for the next shoe to drop in some ways. You know, there's the COVID, you know, all the COVID mask relief stuff that's happening, which, you know, it makes me feel a kind of way, I guess. I think in terms of racial reckoning and where the United States is, you know, I'm an historian, so that doesn't lead me to you know, to immediate hope. I think things work out on long-term, in long-term kind of ways. I think also though, I feel as though now is the time to be moving around. In being an historian, I know that there are these small gaps in history where if you can push through those gaps, there could be some kind of progress. And so there's a tiny bit of hope, a tiny sliver of hope I have, but again, my anxiety is not all washed away. I can tell you that.
I can empathize with you, Stefan. You know, this last year really shook me up in a big way. And with all the atrocities happening, not only globally, but even in my own community, I know people have said, oh, you're so fortunate you live in Irvine, a really diverse community. But just down the street, a young 19-year-old woman was beat up at the skate park for being Korean. And those kinds of things, you know, just shook me so much that I pivoted my career. So in the last 20 plus years, I've been in talent and HR, and I've moved to consulting, to giving training on talent and diversity so that I can help companies globally re-examine who they are traditionally hiring and maybe expand their comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, for me, you know, it's push-pull time, right? Because there's this conversation, right, that we're having. And I think that these conversations are actually happening more frequently. The whole kind of quote unquote DEI framework and equity frameworks are popping up in corporations that never considered the work before. And folks are being hired to engage in these processes, right? So these dialogues are taking place, which I think is the position that I hold in terms of the hopefulness about this being hopefully a groundswell of interest, that it can be sustained, that folks can actually engage in an earnest way so we can actually see some of those changes. Because Stefan, I'm like you, you know, the history of this country, you know, is kind of been predicated on these inequities. It's been the lifeblood of capitalism, quite frankly. You can't have a labor force unless you actually have people who are put in positions of inferiority and positions to be classified as less than. That's how the economic engine works in the United States and globally. So the fact that we're having these dialogues now is where I kind of stand. I've never been busier than in the past 24 months. You know, the phone has been ringing consistently, which again is a good thing, because that means that folks are willing to engage in this conversation. But so that's the positive. And then the negatives are, you know, we're still engaged in this level of conversation in 2021. And so that's also kind of that balancing act. And then again, personally, like, you know, there's been just personal losses in the family as it relates to COVID and the inequities as it relates to healthcare and the distribution of resources in certain communities. And so a lot of like personal loss, right? And so hopeful some days, you know, looking at the ceiling, trying to put 10 toes down to keep moving. So it fluctuates, but today is a good day.
Derric, thank you. Thank you so much for being real. And part of the reason that we wanted to create this convening in this space today was just to continue to build community, because we know that in these times that are so difficult, we need each other. We need to lean on each other, on each other's wisdom, on your strength. And so thank you. And of course, we are all here for you, Derric. So thank you so much, though, for being here for us today. And I want to just touch on something you said around the work, the volume and sustaining this work, right? We have experienced the same thing in terms of clients and individuals asking us questions about racial justice, wanting to share thoughts that they may never have had before, having curiosities being explored. And that all leads a little bit to a conversation, though, about what's the deep work that needs to be done and what might be seen as performative and what's actually real. So Stefan, I want to go to you with this question to start, and then Annie and Derric, please jump in. But Stefan, I want to get your thoughts about What is the impact of what we've been hearing a lot about in terms of performative action and virtue signaling? Can you talk a little bit about virtue signaling, what it means for you, and what the dangers are around it?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think people were greatly shocked, of course, by the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and so many others. They were shocked in part because they couldn't go anywhere else, because the TV had them held, hostage, and the pandemic had them held hostage, and so they had to actually see this Black Death up close, whereas before they could, continue to soccer practice or continue to wherever they had to go. This, I think, moved a lot of people in ways that they hadn't been moved before. And so one of the things that's easiest to do in these moments is to try to show solidarity in some ways. And so we saw this at an institutional level around the United States. And so in corporations and in higher education, in education institutions writ large, we saw statement after statement come out about, supporting Black lives and that sort of thing. I'm watching Dove commercials. I'm sorry if you work for Dove. I'm watching Dove commercials telling me how Black lives matter. I'm watching all these different corporations tell me how Black lives matter. And I was fascinated, truly fascinated by the whole thing, because before then I had never seen any Black people on the commercials. Before then, I hadn't heard about which Black person was a CEO or a chief operating officer or anything like that. Furthermore, I just got off a call doing a Juneteenth kind of thing with one Fortune 50 company. And this company, within a 10-mile radius, there are underfunded schools around this Fortune 50 company. And so while you're virtue signaling, telling me happy Juneteenth and telling me my Black life matters, why are these poor Black kids not having resources in the school that's within 10 miles of you, and you're making billions of dollars and not paying any taxes? To me, this is the essence of it all. This is the essence of this kind of virtue signaling that's going on. So in higher education, which I study and which I focus on, the idea of creating anti-racist institutions, that's a hard road to hoe in my mind, because many of these institutions were created precisely to be racist. And so to extirpate racism from these spaces is going to require a certain kind of revolution that I'm not sure everybody is prepared for, because it costs money, it costs energy, and it costs time. And those things are all in short supply here recently.
I'll just add on that I admire companies that are making an effort, but I more so admire companies that admit that maybe they have not paid enough attention to DEI factors in the past. But what bothers me is companies that are truly not caring of their employees or care about DEI, and then they virtue signal. And what will happen, and what I've seen a lot on subreddit groups, different Slack groups, et cetera, is these employees will call out their companies and they will say, it's false. It's I wish we wouldn't do that. There are, there's no diversity here in this company. So I think it's dangerous if you aren't focusing on DEI, then just admit it and make plans and steps and efforts of what you're going to do versus just doing virtue signaling.
Yeah, I think, it's, again, glad to see the conversations taking place. I think, we're at a time period now, we have to probably expand beyond the conversations of DEI. A lot of that stuff is kind of focused primarily on these kind of quota systems and the things that you can articulate in commercials, on the brochure, right, to say that you are not tone deaf to these issues. But I think you have to, really dig deeper down and actually talk about what the accountability systems are in place to make sure that what's being articulated as it relates to your kind of new value sets with DEI dovetails directly into the operations of whatever companies that you have, whatever institutions that you're running, right? And be able to really display those matrix and see how you're actually improving. If you've been, again, tone deaf to these issues before, how you're actually improving in these areas and making those general announcements on a consistent basis. I think that really shifts the dynamics behind where you truly stand, how it then plays into like what you're going to be moving on in the future, and not being this kind of tailored window that we're in right now, because everybody's alert and quote unquote woke to the current circumstances in society. So what a company actually displays in terms of not only just the virtue signaling, but now how the operations are shifting based on those values will be the thing that we should really take heed to and hold people accountable for in the future.
Thank you. And again, Derric, the word accountability is so key in this conversation. So I want to ask all of you for some advice around what we brought up just now about Happy Juneteenth, right? So we know Juneteenth is coming up and the emails are starting to fly, the events are happening. How might you respond to someone who says to you, Happy Juneteenth, and this may just be performative? What would you say to them? So we've got, again, about 100 people on the call who are all taking notes and trying to figure this out. What might be an appropriate response to someone who maybe we want to hold accountable, but we're not exactly sure how to do it? What would you say to them?
I would, of course, say Happy Juneteenth and Jubilee back, but let me just say this. I'm scared as hell that Juneteenth is going to get the American holiday tradition. And by that, I mean, Americans celebrate holidays, like we sizzle meat and we pop firecrackers, but don't have a clue what we're celebrating, like not even a thought about like what we're celebrating at all. And so like, I'm scared for that to happen to Juneteenth. I know the Senate just passed a Juneteenth holiday and this sort of thing. That's not what the people on the street were asking for, by the way. We would love voting rights. We would love, protection in terms of how we're policed and everything else. But since you gave us Juneteenth, I'm scared of the furniture, the furniture sales, the furniture store sales, and the cell phone plans, the Juneteenth cell phone plans. So in my mind, yes, Happy Juneteenth. It freaked me out last year. It took all these Black people dying, and then some white officials out where I am hit me with the text or the Happy Juneteenth, and I was like, this is weird. This was always something in community, and so I'm for Black people being acknowledged, and in the end, Juneteenth being recognized in a larger way is a good thing. But I'm just asking whomever tells me Happy Juneteenth that they be reflective about not only the Jubilee part, but the struggle for justice up until Juneteenth and after Juneteenth.
Yeah, I guess in response, I would ask them flippantly, how are you celebrating this year? As a first step, and then what steps are you taking to ensure that the tenets of Juneteenth actually permeate in terms of what societal inequities we still have to face. I mean, I think that's really the conversation, right, about the education. And Stefan, I had to laugh because they bastardized K-Day as well with these same tenets focused on lawn furniture sales and discounts without really having a clear indication about the struggles and what the man was about. So I'm with you. I'm concerned about the bastardizing of the occasion. I was thinking about Kwanzaa, which I don't celebrate, by the way, but it's funny. I've been approached during the holiday season, Happy Kwanzaa. I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to that because I don't even celebrate Kwanzaa. But I don't want that level of it's not insensitive, but the knowledge centered on because I represent a certain community that I'm somehow connected to this thing, because it's another performative exercise sometimes that puts you in a situation where you're having to engage and sometimes in an unearnest way. Yeah, a lot to unpack with that question, Reena. But I'm happy that again there's some knowledge and conversation that's centered around what the time period actually means in terms of the history of African Americans in this country. And hopefully that extends and dovetails into the educational space and in people's homes to actually have more kind of expansive dialogue.
Thank you all. Annie, I'm going to go to you next, but Stefan, I have to just say that I was laughing when you said cell phone discounts, because I know you're in the market for a new cell phone, so that you might be actually excited about. And then maybe you can tell them because you're Black, you can get an extra discount. I don't know. And I'm happy to work with you on that. But thank you all. It is a tough question, right? And it's a real question, though, I think, in terms of, again, really holding people accountable right now so that we're moving beyond just the words. And Annie, so I want to go to you with this next piece about culture and employment. So you talked a little bit about companies that will be very honest about admitting that they're not doing anything around DEI. They don't have a plan, they don't have strategy. And now you're seeing more companies get on the bandwagon. What have you seen make a real difference for you as an employee, where a company takes a position on DEI and you feel like it's really authentic?
Yeah, I mean, I think affinity groups and ERG groups are a start, at least to listen to more of your employee base. But I'm also on the board for 10C, and we work with both businesses and nonprofits. And I think everyone knows that in California, there was a law passed where you have to have more representation on your board of directors here by 2022. So with 10C, we've started it's called a V-Lead program, and I'm happy to share documentation on it. But we've taken, knowing that there are companies that don't have that have underrepresented board of directors, we are coaching 15 people in a cohort, and we'll continue to do it every year to become leaders of nonprofits, to be on their board. So again, I think that we could be disappointed in where companies are at, or we can be a part of the change that we want to see happen in this world. So I'm really proud that I'm a part of 10C and seeing that happen.
And a little bit of, in your last career experience, did you feel like the API dialogues that were hosted, that you and I actually were a part of, did you feel like those were helpful?
Yes, I think we've shared, personally and in the groups, especially for the API community, we're not very vocal. We usually don't speak up a lot, and we kind of suppress what we're feeling. So giving people a forum and guidance on how to have that dialogue was very helpful. I've had so many AAPI employees reach out to me and just say how much they appreciated that time and space to be real, to cry. I mean, I cried on it. We shared our frustrations. So I think anytime that you can have that real dialogue is very helpful.
Thank you. And Derric, I want to go to you next here around being real. So I think you shared an experience with us where you were starting in one of your work experiences, trying to come in, make some change, and really do the work in a real and impactful way. And someone had said to you, "But are you trying to change us?" or something to that effect. Can you share a little bit more about that story and talk a little bit about the dialogue piece that Annie just mentioned? The dialogue is important. It is a starting point, but how much of that do you feel like changes a culture?
Yeah, so the story you alluded to, actually was maybe the third day when I was brought into my current position to really kind of examine and look at how educational systems can be reframed around this kind of equity and justice lens. So, the objective was to do that kind of landscape analysis in-house to figure out what was working and what wasn't. And in my kind of, the road shows that you do when you're brought into an environment, I had to do a semi-presentation about like background and where I was. And, there were a number of parents that approached me afterwards in terms of like the thank yous and, welcomes. And, one of the second or third question I received was, really love to have you, really glad you're here, really excited about the work that you're looking to do here. But I have a question for you, and that centers on, are you trying to change us, right? There was this concern about the kind of traditional norms, the value sets in the school as a whole, and whether or not this work would essentially modify what people loved and, what they felt was endearing about the space. And so I think that kind of really centers on, let me just state that like cultural change or any kind of successful transformation will not happen without some form of struggle. It is what it is, unfortunately, when you're looking at these desired cultural changes. And the hard work centers on a myriad of different reasons. I mean, you have like inwardly focused cultures, paralyzed bureaucracies, patriarchal politics, low levels of trust, low morale and lack of teamwork sometimes in environments, arrogant and poor attitudes, lack of middle management leadership, and just general fear of the unknown that change brings. And make no mistake, challenging kind of these workplace dynamics and injustices will come at a steep price. And organizational activism is emotionally taxing and time intensive. So, all those things will play into the kind of roadblocks that you will face if you're looking to go into this work and to do this in an earnest way. And in order to be successful, you have to develop some kind of, strategic and sequential approach to fulfilling any desired objectives. And one of the first things you have to just be comfortable with is having these courageous conversations as a mandate to push things forward. You have to develop a sense of urgency and identify, then clearly discuss what the problems are. And that is going to take a lot of effort and is going to take toll on you personally if you are placed in that position.
And so with that, though, this is a question for all of you, wondering for people of color who are on the call, who are wanting to dig into these conversations, may not have in the past because of power dynamics. They didn't want to lose their job. They weren't sure exactly how to start the conversation. What would you say to people of color who are struggling with a little bit of fear themselves around having this conversation and being real? Annie, like you did, you were very real. You said you cried. We were, again, in that meeting together. And so, of course, I know that you were being vulnerable and you were showing up as your authentic self. But what else can people of color do if they are facing barriers to having the conversation?
I think one of the big things is, you can't go at it alone, right? There's a need for you to build an influential coalition of the willing that's powerful enough to help you lead the change that you envision, and clearly communicating the intended vision of what needs to happen within these workplace dynamics. And then you got to get to work and look at changing the systems and structures that undermine the change vision that you desire. Generating the short wins at first that you celebrate openly and loudly to let people know that, change is actually happening. You have to push for hiring and promoting and developing more kind of early adapters, folks who can implement the desired vision that you have. And then you have to anchor these new approaches in the culture by clearly articulating the connections between the new culture and the organizational successes long term. And mind you, some employees who do this work, internally are not being paid from the organization to do this organizational activism, and they do. They have to still do their regular jobs, and that's where the additional burden comes in. So, if you want to be successful, you have to build a coalition around you to actually move this stuff forward.
Go ahead, Stefan. I was just going to add, absolutely, Derric. I also believe that you have to, even if you have ERGs or affinity groups within your companies, you still, or even if you're in, let's say, a smaller company, and you want to speak up, I think finding a leader who is an advocate, like you said, Derric, you have to build a coalition. And so even starting there with, one or two leaders who you can have honest and open discussions about, where you can set metrics, where you can share goals of what effort and what progress is. Oh, I'm sorry, ERG, employee resource groups or affinity groups in a lot of companies.
Yeah, outstanding panel you have here in terms of people thinking their way through these kinds of things. I think the one thing I would, and the one thing that I've always tried to live by is, luck favors the bold. And so we have to be courageous enough in our own selves to confront these issues. Now, creating a coalition around you is best strategy, most certainly. But the other part of this is, we really, when we were on the streets in Ferguson, one of the chants was, we took it from Asada, we have nothing to lose but our chains. And so if indeed we intend to make whatever institution, whatever corporation or higher education place better, then we're going to have to be straightforward about these things. Now, there's approaches to this that work better than, some work better than others. Try calling in first. And so if you're solo or if you're in a small group, try seeing if you can get an interview or a conversation with a decision maker, and try it that way first. I think sometimes I think, people don't like to be criticized. People don't like to be dressed down in any kind of way, no matter how high they are in a company. And sometimes the people highest in the company or in the organization are the most sensitive. So I think what I found to be most effective is a calling in of sorts and explaining, look, I care as much about this as you do. And I can figure, and this is the final thing I'll say. People aren't very creative. Like institutions aren't meant to be creative. They're meant to be protective and they're meant to maintain themselves. So creating the vision for people that requires extra energy on your part, but it allows people to see it and to complete these tasks. And so that's where the bold part comes in. That's where the idea that if you don't do it, perhaps nobody will. And just have faith that you'll land on your feet, because in the end, this work that we're doing is terribly taxing. And one of the things that I always concentrate on is, can I sleep? And what example am I setting for my daughter? And those are the two things that guide me through the decision making and the, I guess you could say the work that I do within institutions.
Stefan mentioned something that I wanted to dovetail on. Oh, sorry, Derric. Just when you mentioned, a lot of leaders don't like to be criticized, and they may take, your suggestions on DEI as a criticism. And a way to approach them, I have found also, is to show them not what they're not doing, but how DEI work can help, for example, the business. So there are many studies, and I'll post one up in the chat, that show the more diverse a company's makeup is, the more innovative, the more profitable they are. So again, you're right. I think you do have to kind of speak their language when you go to them.
I was just going to add, there's a couple of things that I would articulate as well. Really having an understanding of the cultural politics for your organization, right? Because it's hard for some people to advocate in full disclosure out of fear of retribution, right? And I get that. That's not necessarily my orientation. I confront issues directly. And so my suggestion in those circumstances, be subversive. I think that there is an ability to build this network of support and these coalitions behind closed doors and set agendas on what the, kind of tasks moving forward should be, and to check in with each other on a collective basis about how you're performing, right? There's nothing wrong with actually utilizing those affinity groups or those ERG facilitated meetings to have a clear vision about what you guys collectively are going to work on. That doesn't have to be articulated outwardly to the administration at large, because you all will find that there are some people who actually create barriers from you being successful if you are too open about what you're trying to get accomplished, right? Because it takes them away from like what their value systems are. So subversion is not a bad thing when it's centered on doing the right thing within an institution. So I would lift that up also as a tactical approach.
Thank you all, and thank you for the questions that are coming in the chat and the resources that are being shared. This is exactly what we envisioned. So I want to stay here for just a moment about affinity groups, about coalitions. So we know that there is so much conversation right now going on about critical race theory. Annie, thank you so much for the resource in schools. Derric, I know you're talking about this. Boards are board of trustees and school boards are certainly talking about this quite a bit. And the conversation and pushback is really around, why are we separating people? Why are we segregating? Why are there Asian affinity groups? Why are there Black resource groups? Why, even for CCJ, we do much of our work in affinity spaces because we believe that in the model and in the approach. But what would you say to people, and what do you say to people who say that's just a form of segregation? We shouldn't be dividing people by race and by culture. We should instead always, at all times, 24/7, be in multiracial spaces where we can all talk together and where we can all be unified. What would you say to that argument? Or what would you and what do you say? Because I know this argument has come to all of you in some form.
This happens a lot on college campuses, quite a lot. Why do you have a Black student union? Why do you have a Latinx student union and that kind of stuff? What if you had a white student union and this sort of thing? I think one of the things that I say to those kinds of questions is, man, I wish you were around 50 years ago. Like you would have been a real freedom fighter some 50 years ago with this attitude of integrating and making sure that we're all in there together, kind of thing. This kind of stuff I find disingenuous, and I don't most of the time I don't try to bother with people like this because here's what I do know is I start asking people, so go ahead and lay it out to me. What have you done for Black people? Like, just go, and we can start there. If that's the goal, that we should all be together and Black people shouldn't have an opportunity to be themselves among themselves. Just go ahead and tell me what you've been working on and what your history is along those lines. I think that's one part of it. That's the snarky part of the whole thing. What I also do is just pull out the literature too that explains how important it is for there to be affinity groups, for there to be spaces where people of like interests can speak to themselves and speak about themselves without having to explain a whole bunch of things. And so I think that's very, very important. I combine that with the idea that, at least in my field, Black studies, all these different things, all these different ethnic studies, they didn't come about solely because Black people were protesting. It was in coalition with others. There was Asian, Latinx, and Native people who participated with this effort, radicalized white people who participated with this effort, but they were mature enough to know that this was something that would benefit Black people and all people. And so it requires a certain kind of maturity, mental maturity, to see the reasoning for this.
I think that, to Stefan's point through the literature, I, for some reason, when you posed the question, the immediate thought I had was centered on the book, Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together at the cafeteria table, right? which is a book that came out when I was an undergrad, but essentially, it centers on this need for cultural and identity affirmation, right? As we alluded to earlier, this work is difficult. And something that's bubbling up in the discipline right now centers on healing justice, right? Because so many folks of color are, quite frankly, placed in the position of having to be the voices of reason, having to articulate the inequities, having to be called upon to do the work. And as I said before, that becomes taxing and time intensive. And so by having the reinforced support of your peers and your folks in the affinity gives you that opportunity to completely unpack. It gives you an opportunity to speak frankly without having to figure out what words you need to utilize in order to not be offensive. It prevents you from having to deal with the white tears of a white woman who feels that what you said is accusing them of racism, and now the attention goes to that white woman to make sure that she's okay, which then diverts away from the conversation. So, the necessity of like being in community is a reinforcement to the spirit and to the mind and to the heart, so you can actually stay focused on the agenda. And there's nothing wrong with that. About trying to make sure that you remain whole as you advance these agendas.
Derric, I was just going to add on to that. As you know, the work that we do is very taxing and tiring. And when we're together with our groups, for example, when the AAPI group gathered together, we're able to rejuvenate each other. We're able to fill each other back up during this trying time. We're able to arm each other with more stories or data or information to go back out and fight the fight. So, and then I was just going to add on a business standpoint, when we're together as a group, we don't have to explain things that we already know. For example, when I was on the Asian ERG group for Starbucks, we also did a lot of product review. So before they went into Asia, you would know from talking to the ERG group that many Asians are lactose intolerant. So, or they don't like their drinks too sweet. They want more of the coffee taste. So they had to reformulate the recipes to go into Asian markets and make sure that there was a milk alternative. So if you get a mixed group, there'll be a lot of people who ask a lot of questions, not understand. Whereas when you're with a group that understands, there doesn't have to be as much explanation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Annie, for laying that out for us. And I want to go back to Derric, something you said, and just get all of your responses, open, raw, honest response to this. So Derric, you talked about white tears, white fragility, and what we do with all of that in these spaces and why it's so important that we have our own time so we don't have to always honor and address that. So curious from all of you to hear, what do you need white people to do in this moment? What do you need them to do? How do you need them to show up?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's okay to allow the folks with the lived experience and also the area of expertise to allow them to lead in this space. I think that's first and foremost. Really appreciate the allyship, really appreciate the solidarity around cause, but to allow the communication centered on these topics to be led by folks who are experiencing these inequities on a consistent basis. I think that's first and foremost, right? Allow yourself to be humbled enough to support efforts and not feel that you need to grandstand and articulate that you are not only woke, but like directly here in solidarity, but, hogging the mic. And I think that, sets a standard for, I think, all things related to causes of advocacy and inequities and discrimination. The folks who are dealing with the circumstance through lived experience are the content experts, and you need to be willing to allow that space for them to construct a path forward.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Derric. Absolutely. You know, I am not LGBTQ, but I have many friends, and I lead a next door group of 300, and we're having our first picnic this week. So I admit openly that I'm an ally, but I do everything I can as an ally to support the group, to listen, to bring resources to the group, just to be a shoulder, to listen and to learn, and to also spread their message that I don't personally have experienced myself.
What an outstanding panel of people. Annie and Derric are very smart. I don't like to come after them. I'm gonna start going before them. And so you wanted us to keep it funky, Reena, and to keep it real. So let me do this. And I'm gonna, you know, my general policy is to always talk as though I'm not coming back. So take it in that regard. What do I need from white people? I need for you to turn in whose ever uncle, cousin it was that raided the US Capitol in your family. I need you to talk to your Uncle Joe or Uncle Jane and ask them why they call the police on my nephews when they walk through your neighborhood. I need you to check whatever, you know, girlfriend you have who thinks it's okay to call the police on kids that are swimming in swimming pools. Like, that's what I need. Like, I think I need all those things. In addition, I thank Brother Derric for mentioning, you know, it's okay to take to be a first follower instead of the first leader. It's okay to be a first follower. Follow a person of color, a queer person. You know, it's okay to follow in some ways and to not have to be in front of everything. And with that in mind, you'll let me know, you know, how much you care about these things with the things that are most valuable on, you know, in America right now, and that is your pocketbook, your time, and your energy. And so those things, to me, tell quite a bit about where, you know, where your values are. And so no, I'm looking around. Everybody is gobsmacked at, you know, what happened at the Capitol, and gobsmacked at Donald Trump and this kind of stuff. But let's be clear about this. It's your family who's voting like this. It's your family who's running up in the Capitol and that kind of stuff. And if it's not your family, then do you know somebody? See, this is the thing. Like, you shouldn't have asked me to keep it funky, because now I'm going all the way in. We love to talk about and pathologize Black communities and say, well, if all this crime is going on, why don't you tell the police? Why don't you, you know, share what you know and this kind of thing? Yeah, okay. Tell the police to tell on themselves. Like, tell your white uncle who's a police officer to tell on the people who's been beating people, or if he's beating somebody, tell on him. Like, or if he's mistreated somebody along those lines, you do it, and then I'll follow after that. And so I think, in my mind, I'm very thankful for allyship, but I never think that's enough. I'm for accomplices and co-conspirators. Allies come and go as they please and that kind of stuff. I need somebody who's going to be in the cell with me. I need a cellie. I need somebody who's going to bail me out. I need somebody who's going to be in front of me when the tear gas pops. Those are the things that I need. And I saw some of those people on the streets in Ferguson and in some of these spaces, some of these actions around Los Angeles when we were out as well. So.
Or at least to have your bail money, right? So
come on,
that ready,
come on,
going in, right? And
come
so
on.
The purse is ready to like get you out as soon as you touch down in the cell. So I appreciate that.
No, I appreciate you all. Thank you all so much for answering that question and for being real. I mean, look, the stakes are too high. And we have been doing this work. CCEJ has been in this community and doing the work for 60 years. And we needed to get better, right? It's okay if we all don't have jobs in the next decade. I'm okay with that because the work isn't needed as much as it was 60 years ago, right? 100 years ago. And so we need to have this real conversation, the panels and the talks that are, again, performative and that are around questions that don't really allow for us to lean in and to try on these new ideas are done. I'm not interested in those conversations anymore. And I think the reason for this convening was that we brought together people who have done some training with us, have done some dialogue work with us, and are ready to take it to the next level. So I appreciate the rawness and the real, the funkiness, Stefan, to use your word. And I think, again, I encourage all of us as panelists, but all of us on the call to keep doing that and to be real, because that's where the action, I think, is really going to come. It's not in the nicety. We're done with that part of this work. And so I want to take us there to kind of our final topic for today, which is what happens, though, if the work just stops? What if we do just continue to be nice? What if we don't have these real conversations that might be a little bit hard to hear and digest? What if it just stops? What if schools stop doing the work because there's all these politics involved, board members that are fighting for critical race theory get all voted out, if superintendents change, if board of EDs, executive directors change because they're being too powerful in their stance around Black Lives Matter, right? So what if all this happens and we just stop? Who will ensure that the work continues?
Let me do this real quick before the smarter people get to talking. Go ahead and up your insurance policy if we stop doing the work. So the windows that you value on your business will likely get broken. Because people will take to the streets eventually. Like, I think people have taken in enough, and so I think that if you're unwilling to confront these things right now, this is what I say, Reena, you've heard me say this probably 6 times before. You will always pay. You can pay on the front end or you can pay on the back end, but you're always going to pay. So it's better to go ahead and do this work now than later, because later you're going to have to deal with rubble and these kinds of things, and it's going to be much more difficult to build back. And so go ahead and keep forward with this. I think if it all stopped, the people will regulate. The people will regulate at some point or another.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that. I think that there's a frustration level everywhere where there's no way that this work will stop because people are just fed up with it. I know I personally am. I share openly that I don't have my degree, and I can't tell you how many job interviews, resume rejections I've received because of that. And now I'm so fed up that I'm consulting with companies now on how to widen diversity by not requiring degrees, by not looking at pedigree only, like you have to come from this school or that school in order to get a job. So I can't see the work stopping because people are just tired.
Yeah, I'm like my colleagues. I think that there's a certain ingrained learned memory on struggle and pushes forward, and identification even sometimes in communities and culture around what you've done to both climb and pull simultaneously, right? I think it's one of the things that we don't talk about on a regular basis, but here's a clear indication of like difference in terms of culture, right? If you were white and affluent, your orientation is not about giving back all the time, right? Because there's not an expectation for you to do that. In African American community, if you acquired any semblance of success, there's an unwritten rule that you have to look backwards in order to support somebody else also being able to like advance. And so again, the things that we don't talk about are in terms of the struggle is even that sometimes, right? That's an undue but necessary burden that most Black people I know have taken to heart, both spiritually and intellectually, It is almost a given that you do not succeed unless you have helped someone else. And so I don't think in terms of the tradition of like Black folks here in this country, it's part of our orientation. And even if you look at social movement building in the United States, I mean, look at who's at the forefront of a lot of the kind of pushes forward. I don't think that it's a mistake that civil rights movement and all things focused on equity center a lot on Black struggle, and we then consolidate the struggles of others into an advancement forward. And from, again, I know we're wrapping up, but this is classic Marxism, right? This is the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And to Brother Stefan's point, at a certain point when the rich continue to eat, that's where the term "eat the rich" come from, right? Because if you continue to get fat on the hog and there are no more hogs, then we got to eat something. And so we're coming after you. And so that's how like that whole kind of centered on like, the advancement and need. If things don't move forward, there is a breaking point. And then that then begets the kind of revolutionary tactics to like advance things. And so I think we're in this space now. I think, again, people are more conscious around these issues and the need to push forward. And I think we're gaining a lot more folks on the team to make sure we get where we need to be.
Thank you. And clearly we need a part 2 because we are at time. So we do need you to come back and we need to keep having these conversations. But as we conclude, one just final question, really briefly, if you will help us understand, what are you doing for your own wellness? So we started talking about how tough the year is. We know how important it is for us to take care of ourselves. So will you tell us one word, one sentence, what is it that contributes to your wellness? Is it the Uncle Nearest whiskey? Is it the lattes? What is it that you're doing for real, right? That is keeping you well and safe and sane in this space right now?
Both whiskey and putting my hands in the soil. I try to garden and get out and literally just be in nature. It just kind of centers me. So those two things.
I give myself permission to say no. So I usually feel like I have to do everything and anything possible. And now I just say, it's okay to say no, take a break.
It was a tough year, but the one thing that I was so blessed with is I've never spent so much time with my family because I couldn't travel, I couldn't do anything. And so I realized I really do love my family. And so that's how I'm taking care of myself right now is being around and being, with a family.
All right. Thank you all so much again, Annie, Derric, Stefan. We appreciate you all. We love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of our racial justice convening. You have given us so much insight, so many perspectives as we continue our journey over the next 2 days. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Good work, Reena. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Reena, and your team.